Welcome to the Accelerate Campfire. I'm Lyndon Bowen, and today I'm joined by an amazing entrepreneur. I truly hope you enjoy hearing their experiences and life path. Listen in.
Monica Wheat is a strategist, educator, investor, and venture developer. Monica is currently the managing director of Techstars Equitech Accelerator and is the founder and executive director of Venture Catalyst, a nonprofit venture ecosystem development group. Venture Catalyst focuses on investor/founder education, runs an innovation hub, and large-scale entrepreneur initiatives for over 45,000 attendees. She has served as the Techstars startup program lead for over 10 plus years, leading programs globally, and is the founding co-director of Startup Boost, a global pre-accelerator. She has served as a consultant for Backstage Capital, co-producing their multi-city live investment tour, and was the managing director of Backstage Capital, Detroit Accelerator, a four-city global tech accelerator investing for 3 months in $100,000 each and scaling startups for underrepresented founders. Please, without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Monica Lee.
Monica, what would you say is the biggest thing? You mentioned working in advertising. You mentioned being an engineer. You
Mhm.
mentioned working directly in consulting with startups. Like, what was the biggest thing that you took from working in that corporate space, to do the step out and do this thing on your own? What was the biggest thing you took with you?
I'll say this. So I had a very, very tech heavy role. I mean, at certain stints, I was running teams of developers, and other stints, I was doing all this kind of stuff. And one thing that I noticed is we were in Michigan, and people would come to us because we're multi-billion-dollar Ford or multi-billion-dollar GM or whatever. But it was very difficult to replicate a lot of the successes that I saw when I was flying and spending a lot of time in San Francisco and New York and some of the coastal markets. And so for me, the big idea was I saw like I was hungry, like just really super hungry, like trying to understand who and what they were and how they made San Francisco work, how they made New York work, how do they make this money flow, how do they make how do they make this happen? And so the big idea was like, how do I take what they've done on the coasts and replicate it for these middle markets that didn't have as much exposure. And so that's what I started. I was still in corporate, and I was trying everybody else, their weekend gig is they like to build volleyball, go volleyball teams, go whatever. My weekend gig is I was building companies. I loved it. I loved this space. But I was trying to figure out, like, how do I replicate and drop what we were doing in San Francisco, or what I saw working in San Francisco? How do I replicate it in what I now call Third Coast, which is like the Michigan and
Mhm,
Miami markets in the middle of the
mhm.
country. And my big idea was like, how do I make that happen? And for a long time, there was a lot of challenge of like people pushing back on that, saying like this isn't where talent was, or this wasn't where money was, or venture investment was, and all that kind of stuff. But I became obsessed with this idea that an effective ecosystem of people could make everything work the same as it did in San Francisco, the same as it did in what's that, New York.
Mhm.
And so my big idea was like, how do I replicate it? How do I package it? Who do I
Yeah.
bring here to prove that this market is viable? And so I became really good. I used a lot of my contacts from my former lives, all of them, all my former corporate lives, in all the different ways I was operating. And I would bring them here for
Mhm.
conferences and special talks and just stuff
Right,
like
right,
that, just to
right.
kind of see if we could build this same thing here. And so my big idea was that we could do it the same, if not bigger, in these middle markets. And so it kind of took off from there. First is something that I was doing on the side, and then something that I took on as a full scale, full time career path.
And I mean that's amazing. Like you were able to triage, so many different industries, so many different skill sets, and bring them together into one thing, right? Or multiple things, right? Because you're
Yeah.
juggling so much at the same time. um, like, uh, how long did it take you to take that initial idea and start doing it like full time? What was that transition? Did you just like make the hop, or yeah?
I was in corporate. I would always tell, like, I can quote back to my very first angel investment that I tried to make. What I made was in 2006. But those first angel investments failed miserably. And partially because the ecosystem wasn't robust enough to just slap money. You couldn't just give them money and they were going to grow. So in 2006 is when I first started. Um, and then I kept moving and pushing and moving and pushing. I would say like about 2009 is when we really started to hit fire, because in 2008, 2009, that's when GM and Chrysler went into bankruptcy. and it kind of shook up the foundation of like what people thought was a standard only way you're going to make money in this market. And they became more open to the thought that entrepreneurship and risk were worth it because they already were experiencing risk. They already were in the midst of it, whether they wanted to be in it or not, because it shut down so many plants and so many companies, and so everybody's contracts got cut. So what they had relied on for umpteen generations was not there anymore. And so they became more open to this thought of like, okay, we'll support you, we'll give you space, we'll give you money, we'll try this, we'll add. And so I would say the transition was 2006 till now. I think I officially went full time in like, I don't remember, like I want to say 2014. That sounds right, but that might not be right. But I was doing, I went back into corporate at least once in there. But yeah, I would say from 2006 till now has been the this side of the, and that seems like so long. Oh
Yeah,
gosh, this seems like so long. But yeah, 2006 to now is when I've been doing the bulk of the work.
it just means that you're a pro. That's all that means.
I'm like, it's a
um,
zero.
I'm really curious. You're mentioning this, this economic scene, right? Post
Mhm.
2009, that is a vastly different space, than it was pre
Oh yeah.
2009, and that's something that I feel really honestly has exacerbated, given coronavirus and given everything, name what's going on in the world right now, right?
Hmm.
Particularly for young entrepreneurs and, let's say even a high school student or a college student, someone that's trying to like really get their foot in the door.
Hmm.
What are the necessary skills that you said you learned through your years of experience necessary to operate as an entrepreneur, in this current, market?
I would say well, number one was resilience. And the number one thing you know as an entrepreneur is people are going to doubt that you can do what you say you can do, and that's exactly my hometown is the Detroit, Michigan area. So I was born in, not raised in the suburbs, but in that area is where we're from, and everyone doubts Detroit out the gate, or they used to. Now they've seen it grow and seen it resurge and all that kind of stuff. But I'll definitely say that there was that initial that resilience that you have to have that. The second thing is problem solving. It's like you have like you're not going to come like entrepreneurship doesn't come in a package that you open and you just like put the pieces together and then now you have a company. Like you have to like create almost every step of what you need in order to make your company successful. And so because of that, like you get really good at problem solving. Like things are in front of you, you figure out like what pieces you have, what pieces you don't, and you create solutions. And whether that's a solution to get a customer, to follow up with a customer, to create a product, to sell a product, to market a product, to hire somebody, to pay somebody when you don't have revenue coming in, there are solutions that you just learn to create along the way. So there's a resilience aspect, there's a solution aspect, and then I would think the other side of it is then especially coming from a market that is underestimated or undervalued,
Okay.
and just coming from a space and a place of being an African American woman in tech and an African American woman in venture capital. The other side of it is that you do a whole lot with a whole little, very
Mm,
little. And
yeah,
you learn to get really good at that, and sometimes to your detriment.
yeah.
You learn to get really, really good at like doing a whole lot with a whole little.
Always
And
bootstrapping.
Yes, always. Like I mean, we did. I mean, 10,000 person, 5,000 person events and conferences and things like that with like volunteer teams and like
Mm,
month to month um credit cards and everything else to
yeah.
make it go live. But it happened and it was huge and it was huger every year. And but then you become addicted to it. That's kind of what we were talking about earlier with some of
Mm,
the big founders of these tech companies. You become
yeah.
addicted to like seeing how far you can push it the next time and what you can do
Mm,
the next time. And that's how companies grow. You push it beyond what should be reasonable because it's not in front of you. You don't see a path like here's this easy path on how I'm going to get these thousands of people into one space, or how I'm going to make money, or how I'm going to enable other companies to make money. You have to create the path. And so it just becomes a whole set of skills that you hopefully get a chance to hone and package and then apply to a good company.
you know, I feel like you mentioned so much resilience here today. It's something that's resonating with the audience. What were those moments in your life that really tested your resilience? Um,
Ah. There's many, many, many,
yeah,
many. I mean,
one
there
that
was.
comes to mind, I guess.
I mean, I remember at times, multiple times, that it was like, do I pay this deposit because there's thousands of people waiting on me to like make sure that this is going to go off and is going to support their businesses, or do
Mhm.
I pay my mortgage? That happened multiple times. And it makes you wonder like how far you're pushing because I adopted my nieces. I have two nieces that I adopted, and so I'm in the midst of like trying to be a good auntie mom. And at the same time, I'm like betting it all for these folks around me who are betting it all, that us working together is going to be lucrative for each other.
Yeah.
Um, the other side of that is like the folks who like put me in situations that I wouldn't wish on anyone. The market is so different right now. And you, Lyndon, you and I have talked about this extensively.
Yeah,
When
we
I
talked
was
about
coming
it.
up in the early days, um, what happened at the corporate roundtables would be like shamed and like cancel cultured out of the like that just didn't happen back in the day. Back in when I was coming up, like there was people who said things about my race, my sex, my body, my brain, my everything at multiple tables when I was pitching multiple places. They questioned my intelligence. They questioned how I got into, just really rude questions that they thought were being making them hardliners, but were really something that now is not accepted. But each and every one of those instances were moments where like I was shamed. Like I was shamed for my hair. You guys can't see, but I have long hair that's curly. I was told that I was too ethnic. I was told that why did I come looking undone, unkept? Did my mother teach me better? I was asked about how could I pitch these companies and still think I'm going to have a family? Like just all things that are totally unacceptable now. But each of those, yeah, each of those are moments that tested me and made me like question like my own intelligence. Like, what are you doing this for? But the outcome and the win was so worth it, and the seeing it on the other side was so worth it, and blazing a path where the generations and the folks who are coming behind us now get a chance to like protest, and now they changed the game. Like I say kudos to the generation that's come behind us because they change. There's a change in the game that wasn't there when I was coming up.
Mhm.
So it's interesting to see it. But I will say I was very honest. Like when it first started emerging, I was kind of contrary. When people
Yeah.
first started complaining, I was like, "That's how it is. Like you're supposed to just suck it up. Like what do
Right,
you?"
right, right. I pay my dues. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, you guys
Yeah.
got your same thing.
Yeah.
But I think that it made us all, I think it made the business world a different place. And I think it
Mm.
changed the tone of everything. And I think that makes for good lessons and good opportunities for other entrepreneurs in this space.
And I think what you're saying is really resonating with the audience, but it also resonates with me a lot. The very fact that you're really mentioning build your own table, right? Like
Yes.
if the rules of the game you don't like them,
Hmm.
take your pieces and go home.
Hmm.
And I think that that's something that Avesta really sinks in with a lot of the entrepreneurs that we have, even with us here today. They're doing that. They're building their own tables.
Exactly.
Um, so I mean, I think your story is nothing but to resonate with that really.
And I love to
Um,
see it. I'm loving seeing it. I'm tickled every time I see it
yeah,
now.
makes you feel good, right? It's
Yes.
the higher purpose that you mentioned, right? It's like why you wake
Absolutely.
up, right? Yeah, it's the deeper value.
Absolutely.
Um, what is some advice that you often share with entrepreneurs?
It depends on what they're coming from. But
Mhm.
I have a lot of entrepreneurs who come to me. So I obviously work with Techstars, and I've worked with a lot of the other big funds and national accelerators and scout programs and things like that. And then a lot of folks will come to me and they'll like, and I'll ask them where they're at. They're like, hey, we're we would have it, but we need money. And if we don't have this money, that's why we can't build it. And so I always push entrepreneurs to be like, look, there's tons of people who have gotten pitch decks and gotten money based on nothing but like an Excel spreadsheet that proved out that their algorithm was true. They didn't
Mm,
have the money to hire a developer and all those kind of things, but they were able to. They had to pitch it 100 times. They had to have 100 meetings, but and I mean a literal 100. But they were able to get through without the money. And if you can't get the money, then do the MVP and do this the one thing that will prove that this is a good idea. So I always push the entrepreneurs just to be very cognizant of like what limitations they set up in their head.
mm,
Do not let the fact that you don't have money the check yet, or that you're not in the accelerator yet, or that you're not whatever, be the thing that deters you from pushing your path. If you're meant to do this, you're the one who's going to do this, but you're going to have to drive it. And the other thing I always say is, especially for my women founders and my underrepresented founders, is I have so many of them that will I always say like I've done these big hackathons with like 1,000 folks, and we'll have like I use the example like we'll have like a big Mark Cuban or somebody, some big speaker or something, and they'll come up and they'll pitch They'll pitch them with a napkin and scribbly words on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
But my women founders and my underrepresented founders, they will have had years more experience, more traction, have ran teams, have a PhD, have a master's, all these other things, and they still won't pitch because they're still trying to get it perfect. And
Yeah.
so the other thing I think is a good piece of advice is to not overthink it and to push your, and to risk it all. Like, because that's what this is. This is a game of risk. You got to get comfortable with risk, and you definitely don't want to be buttoned up and perfect before you send it out, because if it's perfect, as they always say, and as an old quote, you've waited too long. So definitely don't wait till the money to try to prove your idea, and definitely risk it and try to put yourself out there and have the conversations and do the things, even if you don't feel like you're competitive or you're perfect or all those kind of things
Mhm.
yet. And then talk to people to figure out whether you are competitive yet. Don't just work it out in your own head. Talk to people. That's super, super key.
And I wanted to kind of like double click on something that you said there. Like you really started drilling in on mindset
Hmm.
and fundamental building blocks of not doubting yourself internally.
Yes.
Even if you go back in your life, for example, let's let like what were the things, pre high school, pre, any of these notions of, being in corporate or being, being an amazing engineer, like, checking all the boxes and reaching all the success that you've reached so far in your life. What would
Hmm.
you say were the building blocks that prepared you at an early age to be able to take those risks and not to have that self doubting mindset?
I didn't want to be poor.
Mm,
Point blank, period. I did not want to
yeah,
be poor. And so I was willing to risk it all because I did not want to be poor. I saw other folks in the world who had, hard times. And I
yeah,
just, in my head, I was like, only way that's not going to be my path. The only way that I won't be the person that is on the other side, like looking out in, is if I push myself beyond all possibility because I don't want to be
yeah,
poor. So for me, it was really that simple when I was young. Um, I I came up in really, I mean, we were a comfortable family, always
mhm,
were, but I had folks on both sides. I had folks that were really, in my family and in my friend circles that had more money, and I had folks on the other side that didn't have any money. And I
yeah,
just saw the two sides, and I knew that I didn't want to be on the side where it was struggle. And so
yeah,
for me, it was really like that idea of like, okay, well, what can I do so that I don't struggle, so that I don't end up on that side? And for me, that pushed me out of my comfort zone at a very early age.
yeah,
But the other side was I had a lot of people who invested in me. A lot of people invested in me when I was young. I did all these programs like DAPSEP, which is a pre-college engineering program. I did programs at the University of Michigan since I was like 12, like every summer. I did all these programs, and all these people were mostly volunteers. They spent their time to create opportunities for me. And so for me, it's like almost it's a no-brainer to like want to put dividends to those folks who invested in me, want to pay those dividends forward and create opportunities for the other folks too. So I think it was those few things. It's like people invested in me early, very early, and I had a drive in my head from a very early stages. I did not want to be poor. I wanted to create my own fate, if you will. And so
yeah.
since I was really young, I've been pushing for that ability to not make my decisions have be made for me.
I think that that resonates so much with a lot of the entrepreneurs, in particular, because that's the third rail, right? Like,
Hmm.
there's an entrepreneur world that exists of people, writing things on napkins and, like you were saying earlier, and like
Yeah.
pitching it with nothing, just setting everything to the wind, right? And then
Hmm.
there's a world of people, right? Like I'd say maybe probably include, your story and some of that, which is, you didn't have a choice, right? It's like,
Yeah.
you're it's either you build something for yourself and you take everything that you have and make it happen, or it doesn't happen, right? So it's
Exactly.
just really interesting. And a lot of those people don't consider themselves entrepreneurs, right? But
That's so
they're
true.
doing the things that are entrepreneurial, right? They're making a way with no way.
Exactly. And I said whew, I like you said exact quote. I used to say that all the time. I used to make a way where there seemed to be no way. I used to say that all the time especially when I was younger.
Well, Monica, I want to thank you so much. I honestly think that people they're loving it. Steve is saying thank you, and Alyssa's saying thank you. So I think the entrepreneurs have truly like loved everything that you've had to share with us here today. So thank you so much for taking the time out to talk with
Absolutely.
us. Just a bit of housekeeping for everyone. Right after Monica kind of gives her last words, we're gonna hop over to the cafe where Monica will be able to have answer any of your questions if you want to ask her some things one on one for a couple of minutes. And then before that, we'll also announce the winner of our prize with Dale this week as well. So we'll do our Dale giveaway announcement as well. Monica, did you have any final words, any final thoughts? I wanted to give you an opportunity to say any final things with everyone here today.
I just want to thank you guys for letting me spend a few moments with you today. I definitely want to be encouraging to anybody who's on this path of entrepreneurship that you don't give up, that you keep pushing yourselves, but you also take care of yourselves too. That you balance the push with self-care. You have to have both sides in order to really be a beast in this space. You have to have both sides. But I look forward to seeing amazing things from all the people in the Accelerate America group.
Thank you, Monica.
Thank you.
If you'd like to join the Accelerate Collective and attend future campfires, visit accelerateamerica.com/join and check out our future guest at accelerateamerica.com/campfire. Take care.